I really hope that more of these young quarterbacks start to appreciate and understand that it makes absolutely no fucking sense to go to some of these bigger name schools and sit on the damn bench for 3 or 4 years and maybe only get 1 year of opportunity or get no opportunity at all. Like, I feel like there are quarterbacks out there, like you could say, well, usually the cream will rise to the top or this or that. Well, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you have guys that if they had the ability to start for 2, 3, 4 years, could grow and develop their skills and grow their bodies and grow their minds and grow into their potential. And you start thinking sometimes like, hey, some of the quarterbacks we be talking about each year when it comes to the draft will be different. The reality is that I understand these kids get caught up in the bullshit that some of these most successful coaches like the Dabo Sweeneys of the world and the Nick Sabans of the world and, the Ryan Days of the world and the Brian Kellys of the world and et cetera. Like, they sell them a bill of goods and they sell them on this, and it's incredibly appealing to think about playing on national TV in primetime spots almost every week and playing in front of, in normal circumstances, 90 or 100,000 rabid fans, like going to a program that has a history of winning big games and winning conference championships, competing for national championships, winning national championships, putting players in the NFL, having players win Heisman trophies and all that other stuff. But the reality is, in today's world, like, if you can play, they will find you. Do not go sit on the bench for 3 years at a Georgia or an Auburn or something. Like, go somewhere else and play right away. And I see somebody like Malik Willis, who a couple of years ago was buried on the depth chart at Auburn. Now you're coming into 2021 and we're talking about him being a potential first-round pick. We're talking about him potentially being the most exciting quarterback in this year's upcoming draft class. Why? Because he transferred. I don't know why the fuck he would choose Liberty of all godforsaken places, but he did. But he goes to Liberty and has himself a decent 2020, and Liberty had a great year as a team themselves, and people really stood up and took notice of this young man. I mean, completed over 64% of his passes, 20 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, had over 900 yards rushing, 14 touchdowns, like just a truly dynamic, explosive, exciting type of player that you wonder, like, hey, if you'd have went to a program like a Liberty or like one of these smaller, Division I type of schools, would you have gotten the opportunity to start as a freshman or an opportunity to start as a sophomore? Would you be even more along in your career journey if you had done so? And I hope more quarterbacks especially start to take note of this, as there's no reason to go as a 5-star quarterback, sit on the bench for a year or two behind another 4 or 5-star quarterback that's playing ahead of you. That's stupid. Your clock is ticking. Go somewhere where you can learn on the fly, you can learn on the go, because you're playing from day one. But I come back to Malik Willis, because that's the focus here of this video, and I don't disagree with the assessment that this is arguably the most exciting quarterback prospect coming up in the 2022 NFL Draft. I know we're a long ways out, and it feels like a bold statement to say that, but I sure the hell don't think it is bold, because I think it's valid. Like, when you look at him, he's got some of those eye-popping wow moments, those eye-popping wow plays. He's got steak, but more importantly, he's got sizzle. And he's got some elite traits that project really well to the NFL level. He's got work to do. But man, some of those elite traits and characteristics sure are freaking tantalizing. When I look at his biggest strengths, the first thing that stands out to you is his rocket launcher of a right arm. That ball arrives quickly and with a purpose, consistently to all 3 levels of the field. He can make throws that most of the other quarterbacks in this class cannot make, whether it is as a pocket passer or whether that is on the move. He can throw frickin' laser beams. So he has elite level arm talent packed into that 6'1" frame. He's a top level runner who could be a home run threat as a ball carrier. He's got vision, he's got speed, he's got elusiveness. He runs, up to his size, if not bigger than his size. Like, this is a guy that you can see making big time plays happen with his feet. The type of dual threat quarterback that you think with more media hype and more buzz following up on Liberty's really good 2020 season, You talk about a Malik Willis that potentially is going to be getting some Heisman conversation, maybe in the Heisman race this upcoming year. And we'll see how he reacts to that spotlight, because it's like he kind of came out of nowhere, which is both fair and maybe not entirely true, but nonetheless, like, this is a young man that put himself on the radar because of that rocket launcher right arm, because of that top-level elite ability as a runner. Like, if you took him and put him in the NFL now as a runner, he's elite from day one. He's in the Lamar category, the Deshaun category, the Russell Wilson category. Like, he is elite as a runner. And you're going to say, well, that's not what you're drafting a quarterback for. You draft him first and foremost to be a passer. Yes, agreed, but in today's NFL, that running element matters more. If you have an elite passer who can't run, you can only do but so much with him. And if that structure breaks down, you can run into some trouble. But you get a guy like this, and maybe he's above average as a passer, but he's absolutely elite as a runner. He can bring you more versatility and more dynamics into your offense to a point where you might potentially want a guy like him more. He shows great touch and ball placement on his deep throws. Like, that's one thing I like about a few of the guys in this draft class, whereas Desmond Ridder that I talked about in the last scouting report was severely lacking. It isn't here for Malik Willis. Like, I saw him a couple of times. I think the Virginia Tech game, you had one or two examples where it's 55, 60 yards, and it is absolutely in the perfect spot. You could not throw it any better, where the only way somebody could touch it is as his wide receiver, because the defensive back can't get to it. It's just absolutely majestic to watch. He generally makes good decisions. Now, sometimes he's going to have that hero ball mentality of, I've got this hose of an arm and I could fit that ball into that tight window, but generally didn't see him take a bunch of unnecessary risk. And he's shown some ability to get off of his primary option, move the safeties a little bit with his eyes. Still an area he's going to need to work on. Yes, your strengths can still be weak and your strengths can still need work. Sometimes it makes more sense to strengthen your strengths than it does to attack your weakness, because you can put less energy here to get a greater return. Well, at least I've seen the ability to move his eyes. He doesn't get quite as laser focused on his primary as some other quarterbacks in this draft class are going to. So that gives you some hope that he can expand his horizons in terms of the mental aspects of being a quarterback. You know, you saw him be able to make adjustments at the line. You saw him be able to call his own protections and so forth. Like, there were some impressive traits there that I want to see more of in 2021. Now, in terms of some of the weaknesses, you know, this is a guy who holds on to the ball too long. He can miss open wide receivers and take some big hits. And it's kind of that thing of, I've got the arm, let me get just a sliver of opportunity. I can always make the big play happen. It's kind of one of those things, like, it's you live and die by that mentality sometimes. And in the meantime, it means sometimes that he passes up easier options or more surefire things. And teams are going to have to figure out, like, whether they're going to be able to live with that or not, or Malik Willis is going to have to do more to be able to recognize that sometimes the check down is okay. Sometimes going for the shorter pass is okay. You fight to live another day. Too many short and intermediate throws were done at full erection speed, I will call it. He was just like a virgin getting some puss for the first time. There's no mixing up of pace or tempo or anything. It is just... That's probably going to live as a gift too. He throws everything at 10-inch dick speed, and it's the first time he's ever used it, is the point I'm getting at. He's going to have to learn sometimes to back off a little bit. Like, you could take a little bit off, throw it at maybe 80 or 85%, still get it there plenty quick enough, but more consistently hit your receivers in the right place, and, you know, just... back off a little bit. You're going to break a lot of wide receivers' fingers with that freaking hose of an arm. He often picks up his back foot in his throwing motion instead of driving through his throws with his lower body, which is scary to think about. You say, well, he picks it up, so he's at least not staying back on his back foot. Yes, that's true, but I would like to see a little more weight distribution in his throwing motion with his lower body, because not only will it make his velocity even scarier, it's going to improve his accuracy. So that's the piece that I look at there, and I say, hey, you know, he had some times where he had the tendency to go a little high, a little wide, and I think that was because he got into this habit where he's kind of picking up his right foot in his throwing motion, just basically doing a butt kicker instead of driving off of that right foot. He can also be quicker to take what's available early and react to what he sees. That's where I talked about, kind of ties into the mindset of holding onto the ball too long, taking some unnecessary big hits because he's trying to always make the big play happen. Again, this comes with not everything needs to be a home run. Sacrifices, bunts, singles, to use baseball analogies, doubles, triples, they all play. Not every one has to be a home run. Not every throw has to be the big, spectacular play. And as I also mentioned, his short and intermediate ball placement is scattered. You know, he has moments where he can throw things into absolutely the perfect spot. Like I said, his deep ball accuracy, I think, is outstanding in this class. His touch and his natural feel and his playmaking ability. But sometimes the short and intermediate ball placement is very scattered. I think the NC State game, you know, while receivers dropped several catchable balls, you know, he finished like 13 out of 32, I think it was, as a thrower. Like, some of that probably comes because he was throwing everything at fucking Nolan Ryan speed. He was throwing balls that were off the mark that, yes, technically they may have hit the receiver in the hands, but they weren't the most catchable of footballs. So I think some of that comes down to taking a little bit off of the ball. Some of that comes down to employing all of his lower body into his throwing motion will improve his accuracy some. And if he can improve his accuracy and consistency of accuracy some, we're going to be talking about another level of prospect here when you talk about Malik Willis. Now, as I think about him, another thing I didn't really talk about much in the strengths, is his ability to improvise, his ability to extend plays, his ability to create on the fly. The structure can break down around him, and sometimes you would argue he's just as good if there was actually structure around him. That's a nice trait that some guys have and some guys don't. You sure like to have those guys that can do stuff when structure is going to break down, because no matter how good your supporting cast is, no matter how good the coaching is or the blocking is, there are times where your structure is going to break down. You're going to have to improvise. You're going to have to go on the fly. And, you know, a guy like Malik Willis is not only going to be able to survive in that type of environment, but potentially thrive. As I look for a comparison for him in terms of a player, you know, when I think about dynamic guys that I've watched, you know, somebody like a Randall Cunningham jumps to mind. Yeah, Randall Cunningham. I know it's dangerous because you talk about the dual threat type of guy, and you're talking about a big name from the past. You know, Randall Cunningham had some moments, some MVP years in the league, and, you know, he had some other boo-boo years. But Randall Cunningham, for those of you that are too young to actually have had to watch him, like, Randall Cunningham was special in his own time, in his own way. He was truly unique. He had the ability to improvise. He had the hose of an arm. He had that phenomenal running ability, phenomenal athleticism. There were other flaws in his game. Now, I think certainly as a prospect, Malik Willis is better as a prospect at Liberty than Randall Cunningham certainly ever was coming out of UNLV back in the mid-'80s. But, you know, when you talk about the type of upside or the type of talent that Malik Willis has, like, instead of just comparing him, making the lazy comparison to one of the big dual threat guys now, like a Russ Wilson or a Deshaun Watson or somebody like that, I wanted to go a little differently here. Like, I look at him and I see traits of a Randall Cunningham. Right now, I would put a grade of early second round on Malik Willis because there are a number of things that I need to see him work on. The accuracy's got to improve. He's got to get a little quicker in terms of reacting to what he sees and just getting rid of the football and taking what's available sometime. He's got to do a better job of not holding onto the ball for so damn long. Not every play needs to be a home run. He's got to learn some touch and being able to vary up his speeds a little bit, utilizing his lower body more in his throwing motion. But I tell you, man, like, yes, I've got a conservative, and I feel it is kind of conservative right now, early second round grade on him. There is no question to me that he's a guy that, you know, we could be talking about in this upcoming next year's draft cycle. We could be talking about him as a day 3 guy that had some flashes, but maybe he's not that dude. Or we could be talking about QB1 in this draft. Yeah, he's not the biggest guy, but goddamn, some of those traits are fucking special. Special, man. He's raw still, and he's got some work to do. But if he can fine-tune some of those areas and even strengthen his strengths a little bit, especially not always bailing out of the pocket so damn early, like, that's another thing. I want to see him be able to stand in the pocket more. You know, you're talking about a guy that has the physical talents to be QB1 in this draft. Will he end up being that? I guess we'll find out in about 10 and a half months or so. And I'll tell you in a few months when I come after the college football season, do another scouting report on him, do a comparison and see where he falls out. But I'm intrigued about seeing what Malik Willis can do in 2021 because the upside is massive.